Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikeshendriyatmane Namah Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nivritatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchisade Namah Namah Hiranyaviryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So today we are going to be discussing verse 7 of the Sri Siksastakam. And in the previous session, when we were discussing verse 6, we also mentioned very clearly that these are very advanced levels of reflections of the devotee when they attain the position of Bhava Bhakti. In the previous week, we noticed the symptoms of Bhava Bhakti were explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He expressed those symptoms. And in the following week, which is today and the next session, we will be touching upon the topic of Krishna Prema. So the previous week's session, we want to quickly summarize, and then we will get around to talking about today's session. So in a sequential manner, Mahaprabhu has led us through the different stages of sadhana bhakti. In the first verse, which is the first verse of Sri Siksastakam, he very clearly exposed us to the 7 perfections of being able to engage in devotional service. And after offering us those perfections, in verse 2 and 3, he gave us the process. Verse 3 specifically, Trinadapi Sunichena, is the process of being able to engage and being able to attain the highest position and the perfections that are being explained in the first verse. And then in verse 4 and 5 and 6, we are talking about progressive changes of someone attaining knowledge, a devotee, a practitioner attaining complete knowledge of their eternal spiritual self, attaining complete knowledge of their eternal spiritual identity in relationship to Krishna, and the details of such, and becoming absorbed with such details. So we noticed in verse 5 where he really talks about the fact that he does not want to move away even for a single minute, and he would prefer being an atom, because he realizes that he would want to be an atom at the lotus feet of Krishna. And he realizes this situation because he has now attained Krishna, he has attained Swarup Siddhi, he has attained this extraordinary relationship, which it's almost like coming back into a very intense relationship after losing it. So it's almost as if someone has lost and found a very, very dear object of love, and that is verse 5. And in that particular mood, Mahaprabhu requests Krishna not to throw him away. So in the mood of a devotee, Mahaprabhu is expressing the mood of someone who has found his place, someone who has found his place and his identity in Krishna's entourage, someone who has understood his spiritual nature, someone who has realized that he is not a part of this Matya Loka. He has realized that he is not a part of the temporary phenomenon which is always manifesting and unmanifesting here in the material world. He has realized all of that, and he has realized the intensity of the experience of coming in touch with real knowledge. Vidyavadu Jivanam. Vidyavadu Jivanam, which is a perfection which Mahaprabhu talks about in the first verse, is coming in touch with real knowledge about our eternal self. And when one comes in touch with real knowledge, the profundity of such knowledge is such that it makes a complete change, right? It is a complete change. It's a 180-degree turn where someone is practically, making a complete change of the perspective of who they are. And afterwards, nothing is going to remain normal. Nothing will remain normal. But there's also the intensity of the experience. The intensity of the experience is such that they're coming in touch with Krishna. Now they're able to see Krishna. They're able to perceive Krishna through their senses. These are spiritualized senses. The spiritual senses, the spiritual body has become awake. Cheto darpanamarjanam. The chitta, the mirror of consciousness, has been swept so clean that now the person is able to very clearly see their spiritual self. There would be no ambiguity. It is not so much that it is inconsistent. Sometimes in the earlier stages, it's obscured. Sometimes in the earlier stages, some days are good and some days are bad. Most of us experience sometimes when we chant that some days are good in devotional service and some days are bad. This is inconsistent. But when one has really reached the point of complete clearing of anarthas, and one is becoming completely absorbed in the eternal knowledge of who they are in relationship to Krishna, then in such a stage, this is Vidyavadu Jivanam, where that knowledge is so profound that it changes the life of the person to such an extent, and the senses are now in touch with Krishna. It is indescribable to anyone as to what happens when the senses come in touch with spiritual objects, and which is what the verse 6 was all about. Verse 6, where Mahaprabhu talks about him constantly being crying. What is the verse 6 is Nayanam Galad Ashrudaraya Vadanam Gadgada Ruddaya Gira Pulakir Nichitam Vapu Kada Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati. Oh my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? He's setting this objective, and what happens is that at that level, when there's complete knowledge and the senses are in touch with Krishna, then automatically the body, which is the physical body that the devotee is in, is unable to cope. The mind is unable to cope with the emotions. All kinds of emotions start pouring out, right? The body and its different perceptions of information have experienced such a huge catalytic change that it's irreversible. It is irreversible. That level of information is irreversible. And as a consequence, the devotee is unable to cope because the physical body does not have a mechanism to understand the extraordinary emotions of the spiritual self, right? It is like someone goes through trauma, they meet with an accident. What is the physical response? The physical response, the body is designed to shut down, right? People faint when they hear something which is very traumatic. Even when people hear something which is very traumatic, they faint. The body is designed to shut down when it comes in touch with trauma. Intense spiritual experience is also intense trauma to the physical body. The physical body is unable to cope. So the active response of the physical body at a high state of consciousness is to simply break down and faint. The person loses consciousness. It is almost as if the body is bereft of the soul. The soul has departed. The body is unable to understand what to do with such an experience. When the soul, jumps out and comes back, how can the body cope with such a change? It's a very intense physical experience, extraordinarily intense physical experience, and the body just shuts down, unable to cope. And that's the reason why we see fainting. Fainting happens when the body is unable to cope. There can be fainting for so many different reasons. Even when the lower chakras open up, and at some stage, when consciousness is trying to go higher, the lower chakras, when they open up, they have a tendency to shut down the body. Okay? It happens even at other stages. It's not necessarily a situation which should be construed as a very high level of bhava or prema or anything. We should be very careful in jumping to those conclusions based on physical symptoms. That's the reason why in the previous week, we went through several stages of internal changes which occur, and the internal changes should be our barometer, because the physical changes in itself, you can attribute it to so many different reasons. So it is safer for us to calibrate and for us to keep a barometer which is based on internal changes. We just want to touch upon the internal changes which we spoke of in verse 6, and because they were very important, and then we can go on to the present situation. So the first symptom that we spoke of is the fact that we are completely freed from wanting to experience material phenomena, right? Which is the experience of anyabhilasha shunyam. The very experience of anyabhilasha shunyam is fundamentally the first experience where there would be no other anyabhilasha in our hearts. Okay, he basically is, there are no desires separate from wanting to attain Krishna consciousness, and no other desire other than wanting to satisfy Krishna. Okay, and then the next desire is the next desire is virakti, detachment from the objects of sense enjoyment, and this is self-explanatory. And then the other symptom is manashunyata or pridelessness. So we talk about trinadapi sunichena, right? Taroriva sahishnuna, amani manadena kirtane sadahari. So mana shunyata, pridelessness. Why is this pridelessness there? It is because the person has attained Swarup Siddhi. He or she has completely understood who they are in the spiritual sky. It's almost as if someone has received, for example, I think something which we can relate to is that when we were in India before coming to America, there was this particularly different kind of mood when someone who is, let's say, in India or any other place, before they move to a new location to start afresh their new life, and they receive this visa and they receive everything, the tickets are ready, then there's a sense of complete detachment to the relevance of the old surrounding. It will last for some time. I'm just giving you a material example so that they could relate to the situation. So in a similar situation, manasunyata results in bhava because there's complete knowledge. Because of complete knowledge, they have absolutely no false pride associated with this body, pride associated with any identity that's associated with this world. It is completely devoid. One more very important quality which occurs in Bhava Bhakti is the ability of the person to cope with changes. There would be no effect of intense changes that occur around them on their consciousness. There would be no effect whatsoever. They will be able to cope with a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, and so on and so forth because it doesn't bother them. Why? Because there's this complete knowledge. There's Vidya Vadu Jivanam. The life becomes filled with Vidya, and they understand that the temporary phenomenon of the material world is temporary, even if it's going to be several years. Okay, so as a consequence, they have a complete devoid, they have a sense of being completely devoid of being affected by changes to the material phenomena. This is liberation. They practically have no sense of desires. They have no sense of wanting to be relieved from distress because they don't experience distress. Distress is experienced when we have attachments. They don't experience distress to the level which other people experience. The kleshas are gone. Okay, so all of that is a part of the very high level of attainment of Bhava Bhakti, and one should remember to calibrate ourselves based on this, not based on the physical symptoms of tears flowing when we chant. It is wonderful if tears flow when we chant, but calibration is better done if we do it with the internal changes. The internal changes have to do with the responses to the material world. How much do I want to plug into material phenomena, right? How much do I want to plug into what I used to enjoy before? How much do I invest in my pride of being a part of this world? So on. The fifth symptom is Ashabandha. Ashabandha it's Srila Rupa Goswami's prayer, which is described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is that one feels very unqualified, but also is fully aware that Krishna's mercy is always available. Okay? This confidence that Krishna's mercy is always available, even though we feel that we are personally very unqualified to receive such mercy, it's a contradictory symptom. It's a contradiction in itself, but it's a part of very high level of consciousness. There's complete confidence, no doubts. Because at lower stages, we might feel unqualified, but we may not be fully confident of receiving Krishna's mercy. At a very high stage, one is fully confident of receiving Krishna's association, his mercy, At the same time, one also experiences this complete disqualification. So the sixth symptom is intense longing for the Lord. Now, the reason why I wanted to touch upon all of this is that the next verse, which is verse 7, is an extension of some of these symptoms. So it was important for me to touch upon these. So the sixth symptom of bhava is utkanta, or intense longing for the Lord. The seventh is namagane sadaruchi, ever relishing a strong taste for the holy names. And this basically, we spoke about it when we were talking about ruchi in Harinam Chintamani and Madhuri Kadambini. Real ruchi is where you don't require any external stimulus. You do not listen to only good bhajans by good singers and so on and so forth. In other words, the melodious voice and the orchestra have no bearing on our ability to appreciate the glorious holy names. So these are devotees who are able to really chant for 24/7. They're able to chant, for example, we spoke in the last week that they're able to chant 200 rounds overnight, right? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to chant 200 rounds. Okay, he basically used to be able to compress the number of rounds into such a way that he could complete 192 rounds every day. How is it possible? Unless one has intense desire, longing for namagane sadaruchi. And that sadaruchi is such that it is constant. It is not something which wanes and waxes and comes back. So the eighth attribute is ashakti, tad gunakyane, attachment for hearing and chanting the qualities of Krishna. Attachment for chanting and hearing the qualities of Krishna. Okay? Do we become tired, or do we have intense attachment where we are able to, spend a lot of time listening to katha? Are we able to really become very absorbed in katha? Are we able to appreciate the different aspects of Krishna katha and the aspects of the Raja Bhakti? That is something which also is a barometer, because all of this is saying how much we are plugging into this body, and how much have we been relieved from consciousness which is related to this body. Okay, these are things that we can monitor, and it's very important for practitioners, sadhana bhaktas, for us to really, Vaidhi bhaktas, for us to be able to monitor ourselves based on these parameters. It's very important. Okay. Now, the last one, of course, is love for the place of dwelling. People wanting to aspire to live in Vrindavan, live in Mayapur, because those are the places of pastimes of the Lord. And there will be this longing of wanting to be in Mayapur and Vrindavan. And this longing is just not limited to Mayapur and Vrindavan. Anything related to Krishna would invoke intense longing. Anything, picture of a cow, we explained this. Anything will bring about all kinds of emotions into the fore. Okay, so now these are symptoms that are experienced internally, which we want to monitor. Now the next verse, these are very advanced levels of sentiments, and as a consequence, we can only go through it in the context of our being able to understand what is in store, as opposed to thinking that we can even understand this fully. Okay, so we're just going to make an attempt of trying to somewhat, touch upon it to the point we can. So in this verse, which is verse 7, which is the penultimate verse, there are only 8 verses, Mahaprabhu says, Yugayatam nimishena chakshusha pravarsayitam shunyayatam jagat sarvam govinda virahena me. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. So this is an awesome verse for practitioners like us, because when we begin chanting on many, many days, we just wait for the rounds to end. Okay, which round am I in? Am I in the 8th round? Okay, now it's the 9th, 10th. Oh, have I done 16? I'm pretty close. I'm going to get done in a few minutes. Okay, I'm done. That's our mood. Now, this is the opposite. The opposite mood, which Mahaprabhu is talking about, is Yugayatam Nimishena. Feeling your separation, I'm considering a movement to be like 12 years or more. his separation from Krishna is so intense that even a moment of separation is making it very, very difficult for him to even comprehend. And he says, the tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. So in the previous verse, there were tears of joy, and in this verse, there are tears of separation. Okay, so this verse is about Vipralamba. Vipralamba is separation. But then how do some of us or any of us understand separation when we have never experienced union, right? When we have not even come in touch with Krishna properly, it is very difficult for us to even comprehend what separation is. Because separation is a symptom of those who have come in touch with Krishna profoundly. So that's the first obstacle we have. But we will have to make an attempt to understand what this is. There are many, many phenomena in this world, and many of these phenomena have been arranged mercifully by the Lord for us to understand eternal symptoms. Because there are certain symptoms and there are certain experiences in the spiritual sky, they also exist in the material sky. So, for example, Krishna has given us this material phenomena. He has given us this material world, in a sense, for us to better understand, the symptoms of the spiritual sky as well. So it is something like, a mother who is cooking. She's constantly being disturbed and harassed by her small child. The child also wants to contribute, but the child is too young, it's too immature, and is incapable of assisting the mother productively. So what does the mother do? The mother is cooking, and the mother just gives the child a cooking set and says, okay, you cook. It's a toy. She just gives the child maybe a toy pot, toy spoon, and says, you help. Here it is. You also do your part. And the child is very happy, preoccupied with doing, the pretense or the play, which is what our experiences are, because Krishna has given us this. And most of our experiences here are a shadow of the reality which exists in the spiritual sky. So material separation from objects in the material world are only a cause of great distress. Separation by time in the material world is a cause of great distress. Okay, it is not pleasure. If people get separated from those whom they are beloved to, it is a sign of they experience only distress. They don't experience a mixture of I feel pain and I feel pleasure and so on and so forth. They don't. There's no pleasure in it, because the complete duality of the material world is that whomever we become very attached to will become a source of pain to us. Why? Because eventually the seed of separation has already been sown when people are born, and as a consequence, separation is something which is guaranteed, and it is a matter of experiencing great distress when separation occurs. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so one can equate that when such separation occurs, sometimes people go without eating, they go without sleeping, they can't interact perhaps for many, many months and years even. Sometimes the trauma is such that they are not normal. They experience severe changes in their consciousness where they cannot even relate to the world after such separation occurs. Okay, we see that. It happens even with people losing pets. Okay, if they lose their pet dog or cat, they find it very difficult to cope with the loss that they can't eat, they can't sleep, they can't do anything for a few days after such a loss. What to say of human beings who are lost, where the attachment and the interaction have been with greater level of senses, and as a consequence, the attachment is much deeper. Okay, so this comprehension of loss is well known to us, but the comprehension of loss in this world is filled with grief, because grief is definitely present when separation occurs in this world. Now, how are we to understand this particular symptom of separation in the spiritual sky? In the spiritual sky, separation occurs. In Vipralamba, the devotee does not experience intense grief as in they experience in this world. They experience separation, but the grief is also pleasurable. It's difficult to comprehend. That grief of the spiritual sky, which Mahaprabhu is talking about here, where he says that Yugayatam nimishena chakshusha pravashayitam Shunyayatam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me. That particular separation, I'm just shedding tears of separation. In the previous verse, he's talking about tears of joy just in uttering Krishna's name. So, this particular duality of experiencing grief and experiencing happiness, grief when there's separation, happiness when the people are getting together, that duality does not exist in the spiritual sky, even though the symptoms exist. In the spiritual sky, there will be tears of joy when there's embrace, and there will be tears, which are also very pleasurable, when there's separation. What happens when separation occurs is that Krishna goes into the heart. When the Krishna is present in the spiritual sky in front of people, then they associate with Krishna wonderfully. When Krishna goes away from the manifestation in the spiritual sky, where he disappears briefly to enhance the love for his devotees, in times of such separation, Krishna disappears into their hearts. They lose consciousness and they relish Krishna deep within their hearts, but externally the symptoms are of grief. Krishna, where have you gone? Where have you gone? Right? Where have you gone? You can't bear your separation. And in such a mood, the devotee is relishing his contact with Krishna deep within his heart because Krishna has gone into the heart. So, spiritual reality and spiritual separation are very different from material reality and material separation. Material separation is only grief. Anything in spiritual separation, anything in Krishna consciousness is pure pleasure. Anything in Krishna consciousness is pure pleasure, even though the external symptoms and the intensity are very different. Okay? It is very different. This is not the same as what we would see when there's separation in this world, but one can understand why the symptoms are coming out. Oh, I don't feel like sleeping, I don't feel like eating, so on and so forth. This intensity, that can be understood. But spiritual separation is intense pleasure as well. So there's no inconsistency in the experience. However, the symptoms of how they experience this could be different. It's either Krishna outside or it's Krishna inside the heart. So there's no change there. Okay? So that's the first point one has to understand about spiritual separation, but one can appreciate what that separation is all about. Why is Mahaprabhu talking about it? And one can also appreciate where we are. Okay? We need so many props. We need such intense engagement. We need to make so many changes to our life just to remember Krishna. And here, someone cannot forget Krishna even for a single moment. And that moment of separation from him, even for a single moment in their mind's eye, in their hearts, is causing such distress that it is unbearable. So it's the opposite of what we experience at our stage. But it is giving us a clue as to what awaits us. So let's just understand that this is something which is wonderful. Okay? This is something where one has completely attained complete knowledge of the spiritual sky. And that level, one is experiencing union, which is getting together with Krishna based on our adhikar, based on these specific rasas. And then they're also experiencing separation based on the same. The cowherd boys, they experience separation when Krishna slips away during the day. Everybody is in the forest. All in a sudden, Krishna goes away with his very confidential sakas, Shubal and others. He just goes away to meet Srimati Radharani. The other cowherd boys, like Sridama, they become very disturbed by Krishna's absence. They begin fainting. That fainting and consolation by Balaram eventually is a symptom of what we are experiencing here, what Mahaprabhu is talking about, that every moment of separation seems like an eon, right? So everybody there experiences such intense separation, even if Krishna goes away. Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? It's finished. So it's something which is described. So is the case with the Braja Gopis, as we see in Srimad Bhagavatam. Their own complete desolation when Krishna and Balaram leave. We see the desolation and the crying and the lamentation of Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj. Okay, so all of this is a part of what Mahaprabhu is describing, and its intensity is very different because Krishna is all pleasure, right? He is the source of all happiness. And as a consequence, one can never really experience material grief when they lose Krishna. They experience spiritual grief, and spiritual grief and spiritual pleasure or spiritual happiness are of the same kind. Both of them are intense and they are very blissful. The ananda of coming in touch with Krishna, who is Sat Chit Ananda, the ananda never is gone. In the material world, it is gone when there's separation, when there's only grief. In the spiritual world, it is not. Okay? Now, what is it? What else can I share about this verse which will help you? Help us, sorry. Okay, now there are many other statements which we can read from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. He's describing Bhava Bhakti. It's worthwhile for us to hear this and understand what lies in store. Bhava Bhakti, which from its very first stages, so excessively affects the heart that it melts and becomes a sublime salve of love, bringing the highest feelings of divine bliss within reach, and generates an intense desire for Krishna. The fully perfected souls term this overvaulting ecstasy as prema. Bhava turns into prema. And there are some pretty heavy statements here. Generates an intense desire for Krishna. It's hard to comprehend what that is. It is very hard for us to comprehend what that is. Okay, so we can only imagine, or rather look forward, aspire for those wonderful gifts that await us in our system. Now, from Siksastakam, this is basically this is a commentary from Siksastakam. This is from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writing. Okay, when Anuraga is filled with unsurpassable and matchless magnificence of love, reaching the plateau of madness, it becomes Mahabhava. In this stage, even the blinking of an eyelid, veiling the view of the beloved for less than a moment, becomes intolerable, and seconds stretch to eons. Separation for even a moment seems to expand to timeless eternity. So, timeless eternity. So, these are very big statements. These are statements that are completely incomprehensible to us of these moods. It's incomprehensible. Why? Because it's difficult for us to even conceive of it. So we just kind of take it and say, it's available, and it's something which we can experience, hopefully, if there is sufficient greed. So, my spiritual master writes in his commentary, he was very brave. He writes, many of us have, there are 10 different types of vipralamba or separation. In English, the first is called anxiousness. The second is insomnia, being very anxious and losing sleep, insomnia. Many of us may have had this experience after something intense happened in our lives and we could not eat or sleep for several days. If you have not experienced such, you're very unfortunate. So he's making a statement saying, if you can't relate to this because you have not experienced this in your life, it's very unfortunate. Because if you can relate to it because of some material experience, then we have the ability to think that, oh my God, okay, that awaits us, and now it's Krishna. It's wonderful. This journey is just going to turn even more exciting than it ever was. So he's saying that very clearly. If you're not experienced such, you're very unfortunate. He's just making a complete, clear statement. Okay? Interesting. I think I'm going to stop here. I will just read one paragraph from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Leela. This is Mahaprabhu's statement. He says, in my agitation, a day never ends, for every moment seems like a millennium. Pouring incessant tears, my eyes are like clouds in the rainy season. The three worlds have become void because of separation from Govinda. I feel as if I were burning alive in a slow fire. Very, very difficult even to comprehend the statement of Mahaprabhu. This is from the Antya-lila. This is the very end in the Gambhira, where he's talking about his highest state of emotions. And this is something which is very difficult for us to comprehend. How do you comprehend this? That I feel as if I were burning alive in a slow fire. How do you comprehend that? I mean, this is the burning fire of separation, but then they also know that there is no duality in Krishna consciousness. And even pain, which exists, the pain of separation, is complete pleasure, which is the opposite of what we experience here in this world, except that the symptoms are somewhat alike. So Mahaprabhu's symptom of feeling such intense separation, I can't exist, I can't cope, I can't do anything, I can't function, all of this can be seen in separation that occurs in the material world. But in the material world, it's all painful. I mean, it is all suffering. In the spiritual sky, the pain is there of separation, but it's complete pleasure. So Krishna consciousness is all pleasure, even if it were to be separation. Because in separation, Krishna goes even deeper into the meditation of the devotee, into the heart. It is even more intense than if Krishna were to be present and interacting externally. Why? Because it's very deep. So that's the conclusion of our acharyas as well. That Vipralamba is far more intense and far more deeper an experience than would be the case of coming together with Krishna or meeting him and having an interaction with him. Okay? So this is intense. So that's what we spoke of. So as we said, all we can do is learn through all of this, but it's very important in conclusion for us to understand and calibrate ourselves based on internal changes. Very important. The reason I'm cautioning everyone again and again and yet again is there's nothing more dangerous in spiritual life than to consider ourselves advanced. Nothing more dangerous. If we consider ourselves advanced, then we stop advancing. So it's always better for us to constantly monitor ourselves internally and constantly work towards reaching perfection. And when the perfection occurs, the risk is gone because we don't identify with the material universe. We don't identify. So as a consequence, we don't have to strive so much to simply, disconnect ourselves, because our own endeavor on a daily basis these days, when we are in sadhana bhakti, when the anartha nivritti is still not complete, our endeavor is maximum effort towards disengaging our senses from the material world. A lot of energy goes in simply keeping our senses separate from the objects. They keep going here, there, keeping them in control. A lot of energy is spent. The good fortune that arises is that when we attain deeper and deeper sambandha gyan, when we are able to see ourselves very clearly in the mirror of the heart, when we are able to see ourselves very clearly in terms of relationships, in terms of service, there's a lot of variety in terms of the information that's available about us, then this disengagement from the material world is very simple because we don't belong there anymore. There's no knowledge. That's vidya vadu jivanam. Until such time, there's a lot of struggle. There's struggle of constantly wanting to disengage from this world, and that's where our energy goes. So the most important stage that we want to look forward to is where we are able to spend less and less and less energy in disengaging, and more energy in effortlessly being able to connect with the holy names, effortlessly being able to connect with Shastra, effortlessly being able to connect with so many different aspects of Krishna consciousness. One of the main things that we can do for us to cultivate a deeper level of separation, as is given in the verse here, is for us to understand what it means by listening to Shastric accounts. Listen to the Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by someone who is very qualified. Listen to Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is spoken and written by, spoken by someone who is very qualified to be able to speak advanced topics. Okay, so all of this becomes very, very important. One of the things which can also be done is that one can share Srimad Bhagavatam, one can share the other scriptures to their spiritual master's presence. You can practically take the book and read out as if your spiritual master is listening. And as a consequence, what will happen is that you come under the protection of the spiritual master in understanding advanced topics as well. Okay, but venturing out into other areas without completing a good study of Srila Prabhupada's books is not recommended. And the reason it is not recommended is because Srila Prabhupada has given us a foundation. Without a strong foundation, it's perilous. It's not something which is recommended. Okay, so please do stick to Srila Prabhupada's books until you have completed them and until we have understood them, in the way they are written, and our foundation has become strong. When our senses themselves are, properly engaged here, where our distractions have become minimized, where our struggles have become far less. These are all barometers. This is a barometer for us. It's a parameter and a variable that you can check. How easy it is for me to chant, how easy it is for you to read, how easy it is for me to do some seva and do other things. That will give us a good sense of where we are in Krishna consciousness. If these basic activities are a real struggle, then that's where our focus should be. Okay, whilst we understand that there's wonderful, wonderful things that are waiting for us in the future. Okay, so we'll stop right here and see if you have any questions. On Monday, we will be concluding the Siksastakam, and perhaps following that week, we are planning to take up Srimad Bhagavatam. I initially wanted to study Srimad Bhagavatam as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur offered us, in terms of separating the verses by way of Prayojana Tattva, Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana Tattva. But depending on, let me see what can be done. The idea is to get into Srimad Bhagavatam, but the manner of separation, the manner of being able to present the verses, I have not really taken a proper decision on that yet. But we will be talking about Bhagavatam, that's for sure, in the future sessions. That will help us. I'll have to figure out, how to cover it and how do I summarize it. Perhaps I should approach it the way the Bhakti Vaibhav course is being offered. Perhaps I should approach it in such a structure first before doing anything more deeper and serious with it. So let's see what happens. I'll wait for your feedback as well, if there is any. And that'll pretty much it. So I don't think there are any questions today, because some of these lofty topics, normally it does not really bring out questions. It is something like, it's a wait and see. Let's wait and see. Let's understand this. But it is wonderful for us to simply know that we have such amazing milestones ahead of us. Krishna consciousness is very exciting, and one can devote their entire existence to simply attaining these goals, which is the purpose of Mahaprabhu giving it to us. It is also the purpose of Prabhupada making all the arrangements for us. So lot of things to look forward to. Okay, so if there are any questions, please do write to me. Hare Krishna. We'll meet again on Monday.